Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature of which we are a part, with deep gratitude to our ancestors who have brought us to the present moment in history, in the human journey. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. We began our fall program yesterday with a 4-day program on regenerative health because we believe that under current world circumstances, as our ecology spins out of control and all of us are experiencing more and more not only ecological turbulence, but political, cultural, health-related turbulence with stresses and all kinds of anxieties surfacing and getting worse all around the world. That the most important thing that we want to do on Humanity Rising is to bring to our collective attention how we can regenerate from the inside out our health, our well-being, our capacity to create strong immune systems, and our capacity to be more loving and kind and tender with one another in a world that's fraught with strife and chaos. We began a new practice yesterday, which was a coherent breathing. And I thought I would just spend a few moments this morning talking a little bit more deeply about the importance of breathing coherently. You know, most of us think that what it takes to be healthy is you need a good diet, you need exercise, and that's about what it takes to be healthy. But more and more, they're beginning to realize that our breathing, the way we breathe, has a very profound effect on our overall health and well-being. And in fact, incoherent breathing, breathing that's done not correctly, can generate diseases on its own. It's not just a matter of lifestyle. It's not just a matter of our diet and whether we exercise or not, or whether we're ingesting environmental pollutants. The way we breathe is a fundamental determinant of how healthy we are. We humans take about 25,000 breaths a day. And I would dare say that if you're like me, you haven't thought about breathing very much. You just kind of breathe. And one of the things that has been happening for the last 3 or 4 centuries, actually, since the Industrial Revolution and the rise of the modern state, is people are breathing faster and faster and more through their mouths. And that's creating all kinds of disequilibrium in the human ecosystem. From time immemorial, the great mystics of all the religions have focused on breathing. The Buddha said, if you want to gain enlightenment, start with the breath. And just be attentive to your breath. The more you focus on your breath, the more your breath begins to slow down. And breathing intentionally in a regulated way increases the capacity of your natural systems, your sympathetic system, your parasympathetic system, your heart, your brain coherence, to optimize the way your various systems in your body all cohere together. We suggested yesterday, and we're going to be continuing the practice today, and as we move forward with Humanity Rising, that there's a particular kind of coherence breathing that scientists are learning more and more about and are coming to the conclusion that it is the optimal way to increase and optimize all your body functions, particularly your heart-brain coherence, and the synergy between your sympathetic system, which is more about your conscious system, it's more the fight or flight mechanisms in the body, and your parasympathetic system, which is in some ways a deeper system where it's about relaxing and it's about calm in your basic body processes. And that is that, and this is very ancient. It goes back so far in human history that they can't find an origin, but science is now catching up in many ways as they are in cosmology. And that is that if you breathe in through your nose in a slow way for about 5.5 seconds, and then you exhale slowly for 5.5 seconds, that in a minute, you'll take in between 5 and 6 breaths, and you'll have inhaled about 5.5 liters of air. So that this kind of coherence breathing is a way to optimize your body processes in a way that creates calm, in a way that helps you deal with depressions and anxieties and all kinds of chronic pain, in a way that enables you to think more clearly, in a way that enables you to have more vitality, and in a way that makes your emotions more compassionate. All done just simply by regulating your breathing. So what we're going to be doing, and we're going to do it right now, is to have some bells that have been developed on YouTube by a gentleman named Steve Elliott, who has done deep research on coherence breathing. And we just want to encourage you to breathe at your own pace. The basic thing is to breathe in and breathe out roughly equally. That's important for this coherence breathing. Roughly equally. You may not be able to do it for 5.5 seconds in and 5.5 seconds out. That's perfectly okay. The key is just to be conscious of your breath for 3 minutes, which scientists say is the minimum that we need, whether it's in heart coherence or in breathing, to optimize the effect of what we're seeking to do. So I'll be speaking more about breathing, and Stephanie Meynes, who's convening this panel, has a lot to say about it, as well as the various practitioners that she's brought in, who I'll introduce more formally in a moment. But we want, in a completely stressed out world, which is spinning more and more out of control, to give you a practice that I do every day, sometimes multiple times a day, that can enable all of us simply, in the first and most fundamental sense, become more calm while we optimize our capacities for health and well-being. So Georg, it'll just be a chime, a bell every 5.5 seconds. And the key is to breathe slowly in, and don't worry if you can't go the 5.5 seconds, just breathe slowly in and out. And at the end of 3 minutes, you'll feel the difference. Thank you, everyone. You know, those overtones that just ripple through the cycles are so healing on your body and your emotions and your heart. It feels like waves of love that are just rippling through the bells. And that's what makes us more coherent, and that's what makes us more alive. So thank you. I'd like to now welcome Stephanie Meynes, who you all know. She's a PhD in neuroscience and embryology, and she has convened a number of programs on regenerative health for Humanity Rising that have been among the most popular programs in our entire programming over 2.5 years and 533 sessions. And the reason, as I've indicated, is pretty obvious. All of us know that we need to be regenerating our health from the inside out. And no one does that better than Stephanie. And today she's going to be convening the second of 4 sessions for our program as we open up the fall programming for Humanity Rising. And today it's going to be on the Taoist way of regenerating health. And of all the great ancient classical spiritual traditions, Taoism is my absolute favorite. So thank you, Stephanie, for bringing this tonality to our attention. And I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. And I hope you'll continue to participate as you did yesterday. Your voice is so welcome and needed. I'm delighted to be here with everyone today and am the beneficiary of the coherent breathing. And what I want to speak to today is the adrenal system. So in the classic literature on burnout, the adrenal system is often named as the culprit. Adrenal depletion is what is noted as being behind the chronic fatigue and the depression and the lack of motivation that we were speaking of yesterday. But it's actually much more intricate than that. So the adrenal system and the kidneys, they are considered as one unit, one system. At the heart, at the core, literally the medulla of the adrenal system, is where neural crest cells that deposit dopamine are found. And those neural crest cells migrated to that medulla of the adrenals at your conception. So that bilaminar disc that I referred to yesterday, that yin-yang living body of matter that is your embryological origins, already had a structure in which dopamine, which is the neurochemical of motivation, the neurochemical of curiosity and excitement, is deposited. And the history of that medulla, the history of your adrenal system is in fact what is reactivated in an environment of overwhelm. This has been the topic of my research for decades. I came from an environment of overwhelm and I became curious about it. And that curiosity has literally saved me and transformed me. And that is what we are awakening when we tonify the adrenal system. My teacher, Mary Eno Burmeister, said, nobody ever has a heart attack. They have a kidney attack. And what she meant by that is that the order that precedes the heart attack is that first the adrenal system is depleted, then the pericardium is the byproduct depletion of that original kidney depletion. And that is what leads to the weakening of the governess, the all-encompassing ruler, the heart. The heart, the kidneys, and the respiratory system, in fact, are all intimately interconnected in embryological development. They are feeding, dancing with each other. And so the approach to nourishing the medulla of the adrenals, which is what we're going to be learning about today, in a variety of ways through Tara approach applications and through the guidance of my brilliant colleague, my precious colleague and friend, Dr. Spring Cheng, from the indigenous Chinese Taoist perspective. We will be experiencing, practicing, living the regeneration of the medulla of the adrenal system. I want to begin by sharing with you a practice that involves sacred sites. I call all the sites on the map of the body that I shared with you yesterday sacred. And they are sacred because they regenerate your innate birthright of buoyancy and resilience. We're going to be exploring two sites that are 24, which is on the front of the foot, and 26, which is behind the armpit, because these are the sites that we would use in combination if we are in the throes of shocking experience. So that is when we are beset by the kind of shaking and trembling that is in fact the commentary that the adrenal system is disturbed. So whenever you see that shaking and trembling, you know that the origin of it is in the medulla of the adrenal system, which has been attacked. And these sites, 24 and 26, Nalini, would you be kind enough to share the illustration of 24 and 26? So 24 on the front of the foot, right between the little toe and the toe right next to it, held in combination with the opposite side, 26. It's very difficult for me to show you the 24 on Zoom, but 26 right behind the armpit. And then you hold 24 on the opposite side, most easily done, of course, in a seated position. It can also be done when you're supine. This combination repeated 3 times on each side will bring you out of that overwhelm. It doesn't mean that it suppresses the healthy shaking. That shaking is actually healthy. It's what you see in animals. It illustrated so very well by my colleague, Dr. Peter Levine, who filmed animals in the wild who, when pursued by a predator, do that trembling and shaking and then shake it off. Holding these sites, 24 and 26, on opposite sides, 3 times on each side, will sequence that trembling and shaking so that it completes its process more quickly. You're not lost in it, and thereby the damage to the medulla of the adrenal system is lessened. If there is repeated damage to the medulla of the adrenal system, that's when you get to burnout. So the question of what is the origin of burnout from a physiological perspective is now clear. And it shows you how when we are in the environment of overwhelm that has become basically daily life in the world now, it will attach to earlier experiences so that those who have more overload to their kidney adrenal system will be more vulnerable to burnout. So knowing this and being incredibly sensitive as I am to the suffering in the world, I joined with my colleagues in creating a video that uses this intervention, which I hope you're practicing on yourself right now as we convene here together. I created a video at the instigation of Peter Hurd on the Tara faculty, with the help of Michelle Wilcox, also on the Tara faculty. I also want to acknowledge filmmaker Elliot Bennett, and Imogen Woods, who you'll see in this video that we made in our caring for the refugees from the war in Ukraine. This video is available to you completely free, and it is for all refugees. It is actually for all people struggling with being caught in the depleting overload of panic and shock, which are many in the world right now. As we are overwhelmed, we are still privileged, as Nalini so beautifully described yesterday. We are in an environment of overload, but we are also privileged. Many places in the world, Sierra Leone, other places in Africa, Pakistan right now, much less privileged. And my offering is this video. Nalini is assisting me with these technical aspects in service to you. Please share the video so that all can see it. I'm sure it'll queue up in just a moment. And thank you, Nalini, for your precious help. Dr. Nalini Yadav will be assisting me for all the programs in this series this week. And
I can't hear audio. Can you guys hear audio?
I cannot hear the audio.
Nalini, I think you just have to select the two thingies, the two. Like before you share, you have to select.
Simple hands-on practices shift your nervous system instantaneously from shock and panic into stability and presence. If you are shaking with panic and terror, take the time, however much you can find, for this Tara approach practice. Hold the areas illustrated on the opposite sides of your body. One position is just outside the armpit, on the back. Your fingertips touch there, whichever fingertips reach. The other is on the front of the foot, the top of the foot, between the little toe and the toe next to it, in the fleshy part between the tiny bones that move down from the digits onto the foot. Do this 3 times on each side. This practice will sequence you, bring you back into presence. You can confidently show this practice to others who are quivering with fear, and you can also do this for them with their permission. While you may be familiar with putting your hands together for prayer, this hand posture goes a step further by adding very slight pressure to the pads of all the fingers and the palms of the hands when they make contact. Your entire body self-regulates. You become quickly centered, focused, concentrated, and directed. You can place this hand posture, which is called palm or prayer inju, at the level of your heart, your throat, the center of your forehead, or wherever you feel the need to evoke increased presence and alignment. By simply holding your index finger as illustrated, that is, wrapping it tenderly with the fingers of the opposite hand, like embracing it, you signal your adrenal system to come out of panic. Do this on either side or alternate one side and then the other. Hold the index finger in this way until your breath deepens of its own accord. This will bring you into a calm, adrenally balanced state. Adrenaline will return to manageable firing, and you will notice this in your breath and your heart rate, and then you will be able to do what needs to be done and what you are meant to do in this moment.
Thank you so much, Nalini. So those three practices, 26 with opposite 24, palm inju, prayer inju, holding the index finger, those three practices, which I hope you experienced while watching the video, will bring in, as Jim was describing, the balance of your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and thereby awaken the medulla, which is the feminine yin aspect. All core aspects, all medial aspects, the medulla aspect of all organs is feminine. The deep internal aspect of the adrenal system is feminine and nutritive. And that's what you're doing with these practices. You are invoking your innate feminine nutritive potential to come quickly out of overwhelm without suppressing anything, and simultaneously nourish those functions that will organically deepen your breath. You don't have to work at it. It will happen by itself according to your structure and your rhythms, and simultaneously nourish your heart. The intimate connection between kidney, respiration, and heart is present at conception and restored with these practices. I would like to now introduce to you a dear friend. She nourishes my heart, my lungs, and my adrenals. Dr. Spring Cheng, who I met through forming Climate Change and Consciousness. She is indigenous Chinese Taoist, a brilliant healer, theoretician, and artist, and someone I am honored to feel is my true family. Spring will share with you a Taoist perspective on everything I've been speaking to thus far. Thank you, Spring. Welcome.
Thank you, Stephanie, and it's lovely to be in the presence of everyone. I feel just now based first in the nourishment of the coherence breathing, and then the following the instruction of the video that Stephanie showed. I feel I actually had a very stressful day yesterday. As you know, that's the fun of these days, is that once a while it's like a big wave hit, and burnout happens. Yesterday I was like, wow, I'm about to attend this conference and I'm actually living it. As a caregiver, as people who care about the world, what's going on in the world, as many of you I know who are, it's like I feel like we are sailing in a big ocean, and the storm is can hit at any day. So this kind of, but this is the practice. It's not about avoid the storm, evade it. It's about going through it and always bring us back to the restoration, the nourishment, and the connection. So what Stephanie has shared brought several things up for me. It's interesting because in my native Chinese upbringing, there's actually the kidney well-being. The well-being of kidney is always very much emphasized and cared for, because in the Chinese notion, kidney is the storehouse of both the ancestral lineage and our own individual kind of potentiality. They are stored in our kidney. And also for the Taoist medicine, when we use the word kidney, it's not only refer to this anatomic structure that Western medicine refer to as kidney, but it also refer to the kidney meridian, which actually starts at the bottom of the foot. It's the first point of kidney meridian is at the center. It's about without showing you my foot, it's at the very bottom of foot, about a third down from the whole the foot pad. The name of this acupuncture acupuncture point is actually called Russian Spring. Not my name Spring. My name Spring in season. This Russian spring is like, the mountain spring that's rushing up. This is where so the metaphor I can think of, Jim started our session today by showing this background of tree behind him. The tree, we all have seen magnificent trees, but what we appreciate, what's beyond the ground, however far the tree extends beyond the ground, the same goes under the ground. If you see a big tree with big crown, you can imagine that underneath the ground, the root also go as far as deep and as wide. And that's who we are, actually. I think in our modern mind, we're caught by this illusion that we are individual tree, but not a forest. But in reality, all trees in the forest, they are connected at the root system as a big organism. The whole forest is an organism. So are we, our body. Our body actually literally connect with all the bodies in the world, especially through those who are related with us ancestrally, ethnically, geographically. But it's just that connection is invisible. It cannot be grasped by our cognitive, our over-rationalized mind. However, the Russian spring, the kidney one point at the bottom of our foot, by place our awareness to it, we can reconnect ourselves to the forest. So, and And I think that's kind of the yin aspect of our wisdom, the inherent wisdom of life that's already embedded in our body. I think in our modern mind, we're so much being attracted to using our intellect, using our ability to manipulate symbolic words, concept, structures, that we so much live here in the head, and we got disconnected from the root, right? You can imagine how a tree's life is going to be if the root is being chopped out. It's going to be miserable, and that explains the burnout we're feeling right now, because we so much function like a floating tree. So one of the practice, and I constantly do to bring myself into my inherent body, into the animated intelligence that's already in my body, into the yin aspect. By yin, naturally it means less visible, more in the dark. So it's the underground, the root system of my being. So I would like to share with you a Qigong practice that activates our connection with the root, our connection with the yin intelligence. So I would like to invite those of you who can stand. You please find a comfortable stance in your surrounding, in the space you're in. If you prefer seating, just by placing your foot on the ground, you can also adapt what I talked about into a seating position. Let's start by breathing in into the bottom of the foot. And as we breathe out, let's send our awareness through the foot, extending. It's almost like we're feeling into the root through extending our awareness underground. So often in our daily life, even for those of us who are has the well intention of bringing restore peace, balance, life into the earth, because we're caught so much we are part of embedded in our modern civilization. Often we reach out or sending out signals through the upper part of our body. We grasp things with hands. We navigate through our eyes, the visual input. Right now, this practice, I would like you to quiet down your hand, your arms. And if you wish, you can also half close your eyes so that you can keep some of your awareness internally, but leave a sliver so that you can see me. And in this exercise, we're going to reverse that pattern and invite the root at which we connect with Mother Earth to direct our movement. So now I would like to invite you to keep the breathing and gently rock your body weight from left to right, just like a tree rocking in the wind. That the rocking starts from the rushing spring, the bottom of the foot. And keeping your legs, your upper body supple, and listening to the directive sent through the connection with Mother Earth. you're following the impulse coming from Mother Earth, and let your body, let your upper body to relax and be supple, and just gently swaying and rocking as you're feeling the root underneath you. Now you're welcome to just stay at this level of practice. And if you feel there is more that you would like to explore, now I would like to invite you to gently allow your arms to follow this rocking, this swaying. However, keep the shoulder and elbow and wrist very, very gentle and loose. And your arms are not efforting at all. It's just simply following this pulsing coming from Mother Earth, and as a gentle, loving expression of what's coming from below. We call this movement the cloud hand. Contrary to what we often do is by grasping tightly our fist, our arm, and using our arm as a primary tool, here we're keeping the hands very gentle, very light, like a cloud moving through mountains. And your awareness should be primarily seated at the bottom of your foot as a root connection with Mother Earth. Just like a cloud is also formed through the interaction of the earth, plant life, and soil, and with the wind and the sunshine. So let your arms movement be a gentle expression. And the third level of practice, you can gently choose any point around you, up, front, down, and use this movement to direct your movement of arm to a chosen point in the space. Be playful. Make this as a game, like you are dancing with the space around you, and just be curious. Oh, that's an upper point is calling my attention. And then you send your arms gently to different directionalities, but always keep the arms as a natural expression of what you are feeling coming from the bottom of the foot and your connection with Mother Earth. And now you are gently dancing through this connection with Mother Earth, kind of like a tree dancing in the wind. Always start your movement by listening to your connection through Mother Earth at the rushing spring. Now I'm going to invite you to quiet down your movement, quiet down your body. Let's bring our attention back into the center at the bottom of our foot, kidney 1 point, the Russian spring, and breathe into it. And as you breathe out, connect with the root underneath your feet. May you walk around in the world, always feeling this connection with a bigger body, with the mother body that's always there, embrace and surround us. Thank you.
Thank you, Spring, for deepening our experience of being coherent and connected to the earth in all that we do and in all our service. And referencing again what Nalini said yesterday, the value of self-care, the value of taking the time for the coherent breathing, for practices such as what you just shared, and for the touch that is nutritive, that is feminine, that speaks to the core of who we are. The value of that in addressing burnout, and I would add, from my intentionality, being of service to others. As Nalini said, it's never selfish to take the time for that self-care as an antidote to burnout. Use the burnout experience, recognize it immediately. The sooner the better. That is a protocol, you might say, in the treatment of trauma. The closer to the traumatic experience you intervene, the more thorough the remedy. So if you can catch the onset in your nervous system of that burnout response and step back into self-care as quickly as possible, as close as possible to the experience, you will prevent, you will be precautionary. You will be using the precautionary principle in husbanding yourself. That's a term from the I Ching. You husband yourself. It's a term that refers to treatment of the water element, the kidney and adrenal system. You husband yourself, meaning you support yourself. So I'd like to explore that a bit further. Nalini will join us, Jim as well, in a conversation about how self-care acts so effectively in the, not only I would say the prevention of burnout, meeting burnout at the onset. I would take it a step further in my experience that not only, and this happened to me when I was doing the coherent breathing and when I was having the delightful luxury of following Spring, for me, it's not only that the parasympathetics come in, a deeper calm arises, there's also the arousal of a sense of motivation and purpose, which is that dopamine in the medulla of the adrenals.
Yeah. Can I chime in?
Of course, please.
Yeah. So in fact, in Taoism, today's theme is, Taoism. It's very simple. The Tao is that moves between yin and yang. So when we actually give ourselves, submit ourselves into the nurtutive yin of the earth, we naturally will have a expression, an action that motive you talk about without efforting. And that's the true masculinity. I think in our today's world, we often like have a lot of masculinity is almost like always toxic, right? But because we don't see the healthy healthy masculinity is the healthy masculine, the healthy yang expression, the healthy male is the one who submit himself to the yin and retrieve that action, that power, that force to move by not efforting. Yeah, so that's what you're talking about, Stephanie, is when we actually give ourselves to this, it's not just about nourishing it. Of course, it's very nourishing, but it's also resourcing that more power, more force to act without spending ourselves, without burning ourselves out.
Beautiful. And I loved the movement that to me was emblematic of that, because those cloud-like arm movements to me are expressive of the heart. The heart, the heart energies move through the arms,
right,
as well as the lung energies, as well as the air energies. The fire and the air energies move through the arms and the hands and the fingers. And when we speak of burnout, we are literally speaking of the depletion of the fire element. So as I started with this, naming the kidney system as the culprit behind burnout because it's so associated with fatigue and a sort of lack of inspiration, it's actually the fire element that we're referring to that has been dampened by the burnout. So it's restoring that dopamine, it's restoring that creativity that really is the sign that you're coming out of burnout.
Yeah. And I just want to add one more thing is that for me, it's almost like a religious routine that every morning I gave myself half an hour to restore myself. I'm not waiting for when the burnout like drag me down, because to having that container is so important. It's like my honor of the yin, my honor of the rhythm of life, that because that's like my own insurance. My health, I don't have money to buy elaborate health insurance, but that's my own taking responsibility of my own health, is to every day give myself that time to practice.
Beautiful. I was hoping that Nalini today, you might share a little bit of the specific experiences that you had with burnout and the antidotes that you found to it, following on this theme of husbanding that comes originally from this Taoist perspective on living life in harmony with the earth, actually getting our motivation from the earth, and how that has been, we've been decapitated, really. We've been forced to live disconnected from the earth, and how we have to take responsibility, as Spring says, to restore ourselves so that we are rooted. And maybe your specific experiences, Nalini, will resonate with other people.
Sure. Thank you, Stephanie. So I think one of the things I was thinking about after yesterday was, how do you know if you're in burnout? How do you actually recognize what it is that you need to do? I mean, obviously there's the listening to your body, if you are a practitioner in any way, or even self-care, listening to your own pulses, which is all discussed on the Tara Approach program. But how do you even know what you need to do, and what the problem is? So I think in being able to recognize that, it's often that lack of motivation that finding ways for me when I was having trouble completing my PhD work, which was this huge block in front of me, and it was all there ready for me to work on. And I literally just would sit at my computer and not be able to do anything. And that's when I actually got in front of the computer. How many days did I not even want to get out of bed? Did I not want to do anything that I needed to do to complete the thing that was hanging over my head? I only wanted to do everything else that was unrelated. I was distracting myself completely. And so that was part of what needed to be addressed. And then there was also a bit of what felt like depression, that lack of motivation, that lack of inspiration even. And what shifted things for me in terms of the Tara approach were specific points and flows to address these underlying issues that would then be able to help me see what I could do for myself to go forward, to be able to allow me to connect back with nature and to connect back with my own body and what the universe is telling me that I need. And so one of the first things that I started doing was I noticed there was in myself a depletion of earth element. And one of the flows that I did was a very grounding flow that had to do with just making sure that I was connected and grounded and in my own body rather than staying in my head all the time. So being more embodied so that you can actually assess what is happening in your body and what your body's trying to tell you. That was the first step for me. Once I felt that grounding and that support underneath me, and the support that I needed was coming from myself. I didn't need to look external to find this support. And so when I found that support, that's when I reconnected with nature, as Spring is talking about, to be able to get that strength, that masculine strength that you're talking about as well. And then from there, it was addressing that motivation, that inspiration that was lacking. So in the Tara approach, point 1 has a lot to do with moving forward. And it's located on the medial or inner part of your knees, sort of where the knee kind of almost connects to the lower part of your leg. And that was the first flow I started doing every morning because just getting out of bed was difficult. So before I even got out of bed, while laying in bed still in the morning, I would start with that one flow to try and just get the motivation to feel that inspiration. And then there's also some additional points as well. So thank you, Stephanie, for illustrating that point 1 there. And you can hold both sides. And then there's an actual flow that will actually release that point 1 as well, which is really helpful. And once you get past that one flow, there's additional things that you can start listening to. A lot of what I needed for inspiration was reigniting that fire that has gone out with burnout. And so in addressing the fire element that I was missing, I did basically, it was a flow that helps kind of reignite that. And it's holding the 11 and the opposite 13, if you can see my hand just above my breast. So middle 13's in the middle of the chest. And then you have the two 13s that are on each side. So holding the 11, which is where your neck and shoulder kind of meet right here, and the opposite 13 at the same time. That one was so powerful after I had done the others. If I tried to do the fire first, there was no oxygen for a flame to even be there. So there's ways in which the Tara approach, that the flows and the points which you really know exactly what you need because your body is going to tell you. And utilizing these things actually remove not only the lack of motivation, but also helped me with a bit of depression that was coming along with that. Because when you don't understand why you're unmotivated or why you're burnt out, or even if you are burnt out, maybe don't even know that you are burnt out. Being able to listen to your own body and have it tell you these things and react to the ways that you're trying to treat it is very much revealing in itself of what it is that you need to do. And so I think that these flows that we talked about earlier with the adrenals and the adrenals on top of the kidneys, that can be addressed for exhaustion. But when it comes to burnout, it may not be the only thing that needs to be addressed. So, what we talked a little bit about yesterday, as far as other things that can contribute to your burnout besides your own actions, inactions, or current environment, your epigenetic, history, your lineage, your story, all of that can contribute to your propensity for burnout, as well as the fact of whether or not you're in burnout right now.
That propensity is very much a topic for the course that I will be offering at Ubiquity. Jim has posted the link for the course. That course will assist each person individually in unraveling that propensity. So within the Tara approach, there is not only this combination of sites, this holding of areas of the body that organically deepens your coherent breathing. There is also a design to access, this is extremely exciting, your earliest memory, your experience of what created that propensity, and repatterning it, restoring it rapidly, so that those burdens on your kidney adrenal system that are somatic and that are stored in your somatic memory are unburdened. So that's sacred site number 11 that Nalini was talking about, unburdening, taking off the yoke of over-responsibility is the way that my teacher described it. So simply holding these sites, even without further investigation, will begin to ignite the cellular unburdening, the unlayering within somatic memory. And then within the course, you learn to deepen that experience and become more specific with it. So there is an extensive curriculum that allows you to do this, taking responsibility more thoroughly than you ever have in your entire life. But it is not about reliving the old stories. That's not the process. The process is a process of alchemy and metallurgy. It's a process of transforming those experiences and actually moving through them, from them. And that's what we do with burnout as well. It's not just that we're casting off and negating or denying or trying to stop our awareness of suffering. That's not the purpose. It's using that experience to drive organic motivation. And I'm a service-driven animal. The alchemy of the suffering that I experience, I dedicate to doing through my unique creativity, whatever I can do to alleviate suffering at this time. I'm not requiring that of people who attend the course, of course. The course itself is an expression of my service. But that's really inherent in my motivation. I cannot close my eyes, as Spring said earlier. I cannot close my eyes to the suffering of the world. I cannot, the self-care that I do, which nourishes me so deeply, vitalizes my commitment to humanity. I'd love to hear from Spring and Jim further about the practice of self-care, the encounter with burnout. I had some interesting experiences at Chartres that led me to offer Jim a treatment, for instance, because Jim is like me, I feel, in many regards. We get all fired up. And sometimes that firing distracts us from what we actually need. So I recognize that in Jim, and that's why I offered you a session, Jim. So I'd love to hear more about your experiences with burnout and self-care.
Well, thank you. I'm interested also, Spring, in a little bit more about your notions of the true masculine, and from a Taoist perspective. I think those are very provocative and profound thoughts. Yeah, as you know, as an alpha male and a type A personality, I'm probably more susceptible than most to the agitation of the fire element inside my being, because we're all in a world that requires action in a very concerted way. And I think that one of the reasons why I've been so attracted to Taoism all my life is not only because I was born in China and came into my spiritual awareness in an Asian context.
You were born in China? Did I hear it wrong?
Yeah, I was born in West China. I was by the Tibetan border in Sichuan, Western Sichuan province.
Oh my gosh.
In January 1951.
All right.
My parents were missionaries.
Oh, wow.
And they were headed to Tibet, but they couldn't go to Tibet because the border was closed. So we were just this side of the border in a little town called Weili. And there I was born. And then 6 months later, after being put under house arrest, the communists thought that my father's typewriter was a spy device where he was communicating with the CIA. And then we were let go, and then I spent my happiest possible childhood in Taiwan from 1953 to 1965, out there in the rice paddies. And so I had my first spiritual experience in a Buddhist temple. So my whole spiritual orientation as a little boy was in a kind of a Chinese Taoist Buddhist cultural framework.
That explains a lot of the presence you carry with you, that graceful masculine presence.
Well, I'm working on it. I have a long way to go, I assure you.
Sorry,
but
carry
the whole
on.
Notion of Wu Wei, the whole notion of effortless action, is, I think, the challenge to the patriarchy as we've developed it historically and are currently practicing it. And if the masculine could trim tab on Wu Wei and really understand the profundity of what you're saying, that the true masculine is in service of the feminine, and in that service, what is naturally coercive can become flowing and supportive. That's the essence of the transformation that I think men everywhere need to undertake in order for the world to move into the next phase of growth and development. So I really want to honor that particular point. Would love to hear more about that. But just to say one thing about my own interaction with burnout, as someone who I've been in the fast lane almost all my life, one way or another, is practice. I think what you were saying, Nalini and Stephanie, and also Spring, is the importance of practice, to take time every day to do something that rejuvenates you from the inside out. And for example, the coherence breathing that I've been sharing over the last couple of days, I do that every day. When I read James Nestor's book on breath, it's a New York Times bestseller, which I recommend to all of you. And I read that this kind of breathing optimizes your body's systems. I thought immediately, I need to incorporate this into my practice. And the effect was instantaneous. I've done a lot of meditating and a lot of yoga and a lot of breathing. I've done the Wim Hof breathing, for example, which is more like Tomo breathing, which is more forced breathing. But as soon as I did the coherence breathing, I realized that this was an amazing way for me to rejuvenate myself on a daily basis. So I incorporated it into my practice, and its effect on me was so dramatic. That's why I started to share it, because I realized that I was just getting more calm and I was getting more acute simultaneously. And I was just bringing balance to my system. And I was doing it when I flew to Chartres to France and around. I would practice doing the breathing as I was walking around the airports. So I realized I was creating a little cocoon around myself that kind of kept the stresses of being in an airport sort of at bay. Was doing it while I was, in my passenger seat and so forth and so on. And we did it 2 or 3 times a day, the whole group of 92 of us while we were in Chartres. And it made a dramatic difference in the overall cohesiveness and, I would say, compassion and loving kindness of the group over the 7-day period. So I would just emphasize the importance of practice, particularly for people like me. And there may be some of you out there that are rather stubborn by character and rather aggressive by nature because we just want to get things done. The coherence breathing and a daily practice is like a daily antidote to our worst tendencies. So I would just offer that out there for those of you who are challenged like I am to stay calm enough to engage in effortless action. That's still a challenge for me, but I'm working on it and would love to hear more, Spring, about that Taoist notion.
Do we have time, Stephanie?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, so in the yin and yang polarity of Taoism, the yin is the denser, the material aspect of ourself, and the yang is the pure energetic aspect of ourself. So it's like imagine that there is a mirror image of yourself that is not taking the shape of our material, biological mass, but there is an energetic presence that carries our own signature that's in the world. It's not even localized to our own, that's part of this is actually bring more apparent by Zoom technology. Like, I'm in Pacific Northwest Washington, but my presence is actually can through Zoom around the world. So the effortless action is this complete trust of this energetic self that we are part of. So that, often our notion of masculinity is that forceful, that aggression, that assertion, which actually what we see is this masculinity trying to free itself from the gravity of mass, gravity of matter, gravity of the seeing world. But when I think, Jim, when you mentioned your experience in China and in Taiwan, in our culture, there's a lot of the great masculine presence. They are the hermit in the mountains. They meditate in their mountain hermit, and yet their awareness is all over the land, all over the country. So that's when there a tradition of the kings, the ruler will go into the mountain to seek advice of these hermit, because they know that their awareness, their energetic presence is so prominent that they actually know what's going on more so than those people who are plugged in, the courts. So I think we need to first shift our own inner notion of what is a graceful masculinity. You know, I think for me the image of hermit is very much capture that. The hermit tends their body constantly, right? They meditate, they tend to the surroundings, they connected with the nature, so they're very connected with the yin, and yet their awareness, they're not just secluded in their hermitage. They are actually participating actively with what's outside in the world through their pure awareness, through their energy. We have a saying in Taoism is that yang by itself do not grow, yin by itself do not give birth, which is very plain. You know, if we think about the biology, right, the yin and the yang has to come together to make life. And that's what happens today in the world is we see this disconnection, this coupling of yin and yang. And that's what we call often masculinity, is the yang that is stuck in their growth, is stagnant. Therefore, it becomes aggressive, assertive, and violent and all that, because it's yearning for its yin partner, that it's lost, it's in grievance. And similarly, you know, the feminine aspect is also wounded, and they always go back, you know, back and forth together. Is that the feminine aspect of herself, without the support of the yang, because the feminine needs to give birth. Its destiny is to support the birthing process, but without that yang support, it's also gets stuck. So it's up to each one of us to practice this yin and yang interaction, interplay of the yin and yang. That's kind of like my daily practice, is to tend to my body and then source from my body what wants to be act, and know and cultivate this distinction of what is my mind wants to do versus what is my whole being wants to do. And it's a daily practice. It's a daily ongoing experimentation. Yeah.
Well, that's such an important distinction between what your mind wants to do, which is generally governed by reactivity and appetite, and what your body wants to do, which is at a whole different level of knowing, and intuitive awareness. And I think that's a very profound point, Spring. Thank you. Nalini, what would the Hindus say about this? What would your understanding of, from a Hindu perspective, of the Tao and masculinity and the femininity in relation to regenerative health?
It's very much what Spring just described as well, in Hindu culture and in the old scriptures about there having to be balance, there having to be both, and there having to be, in every person, there has to be the masculine and feminine. You know, even when we talk about Lord Krishna, you never talk about Lord Krishna without mentioning, you know, Radharani. Radha was, you know, supposedly a woman that was born on earth, but in reality, she was the feminine form of it to equal his masculine. So it's always together. They always have to be in concert. They always have to be balanced. And if they come imbalanced, that's, you know, the issues that happen then. So it's very similar.
Oh, it's so interesting that what you're saying, Nalini, because that site that Spring was referring to as Kidney 1 is sacred site number 6 in the Tara map, which is called balance. And in fact, that site number 6 is specifically about hormonal balance, male-female balance, and that is the exact same site that's identified as Kidney 1. The Tara approach practices are themselves yin practices. Just the nature of the way that we activate these sites is through a pure placement of our fingertips. So our hands are resting on these sites. So sacred site number 22, for instance, below the collarbones, is known as contentment. It brings us into a state of pure presence. This is a wonderful site if you are struggling with the coherent breathing, which could happen if you have asthma or you have a lung structure anomaly, which many people have, so that breathing is not so easy for them. I'm one of those people. Holding sacred site number 22 actually nourishes the respiratory system. And I also call it the wings of the heart. So the heart and the lungs and the kidneys, they're so intimately connected. You literally can feel a horizontal widening through the respiratory system simply by placing your fingertips on this sacred site number 22. And that's all you're doing. You're placing your hands, your palms, your fingertips on these sites. You're not doing anything to them. You're not rubbing them. You're not tapping them. Not that there's anything wrong with those practices, but they're just different practices. This is a practice that is deeply yin. It's a practice of evoking, welcoming, the way a mother welcomes her baby, welcoming the innate energies of contentment. I frequently use the word birthright. The entire system is your birthright. And I'd like to share, before we close, a few more applications for the adrenal system. Again, going back to the original statement about replenishing adrenal function through a variety of sites that ignite the coherence, the interaction between heart function, respiratory function, and adrenal function. So just to give you an idea of the number of sites available for you, the 26 that was in the video, the woman with the beautiful blonde hair illustrating sacred site number 26, and a flow, which is a combination of sites, the 26th and the same side little finger, that is Tristan Oljan, who Nalini spoke of as the woman who introduced her to the Tara approach. So that application is for the heart. Sacred site number 26 is self-love. And the little finger, simply by holding the little finger, and in this case, we're holding it like a mudra or inju, you dampen or give rest to the over-efforting that is associated with the drive of fire when it is too extreme. So when there is not that willingness to surrender to the rhythm of the natural world, and that is something I experience often. I'm so grateful. This is, I think, why I was given this system. I often wondered why. I think it's to help me put balance into my own fire energy. So this is a way of treating the adrenal system through heart tonification. So we want to prevent damage to the pericardium, the heart protector. The index finger that was also in the film, this is the simplest route into the kidney adrenal functions. This is the balancing of your fear response. So the panic and anxiety that is the precursor to the depletion of burnout is treated directly by activating the water element. And we can do that simply by holding the index finger. So again, if you can notice the onset of that fear and panic and just hold your index finger either side, you will naturally be drawn to the side that needs treatment. That will begin the process of reorganizing at the initiatory origin, the onset of that fear response. It will begin to slow it down, to bring in the parasympathetics, to lessen the intensity of your fear and balance that fear, not to avoid danger, but to have an appropriate response to it. Sacred site number 23, which you see the pregnant woman holding, that site is called destiny. And that is directly on the adrenals. You can simply hold those sites on yourself right now. So these lower back sites, frequently a complaint of many people, that is a signal that the adrenal system, the adrenals themselves, riding right on top of the kidneys, are asking for help. If you meet that, I'm placing my palms on sacred site number 23, destiny. That goes to work immediately simply through your yin presence. The yang activity responds by sending nutrients, by sending calming release to your adrenals. And then sacred site number 25, which you see the gentleman holding, and we used that site yesterday for coming out of confusion at the ischial tuberosities. Lying down and holding 25 is one of my favorite practices. So placing the fingertips right on those ischial tuberosities, the tuchus points, right under the sit bones. Those sites are called quietly regenerating. What they do is awaken the ascending energies that allow the descending process of dropping into the earth to sequence through. So these sites and ones like them, there's a multitude, an incredible, ongoing, a lifetime supply of resources for you to tap into at the level of depth that you care to go in the Tara Approach programs and in the Ubiquity curriculum designed specifically to nourish humanity so that we can be resources for ourselves, truly responding from the core of who we are, the yin medulla essence of who we are, to an environment that will only accelerate in suffering. We are on a course for that to happen with insufficient mitigation. So preparing ourselves honestly for how we can be of service to ourselves, our families, our precious families, our communities, and to the world. That's my intention in all that I do and in the Ubiquity programs that I am so honored to be affiliated with. I want to say I feel like I'm on a crash course. Since I went to Chartres, I'm on a crash course of seeing what a brilliant man Jim Garrison is. I was totally blown away. I have to say this. When Jim Garrison took the podium at Chartres and started to articulate Western wisdom, I was completely blown away. I had no idea, Jim, the font of wisdom that you are. And now to learn that you were born in China and that your roots are in Taoism, I bow to you, Jim Garrison. I really do.
You are very kind. You are very kind.
I'm being completely honest. My mouth was hanging open at Chartres. I was saying, oh my goodness, who is this man? So you are very special, Jim. You are.
Thank you so much. I'm very roughly hewn, but I am motivated by effortless action as a primary goal of my life. And so I've really appreciated this session. And Spring, thank you so much for your grace and for your wisdom, and Nalini and Stephanie. This has been a remarkable program once again, and we're only halfway through.
I do want to tell you about tomorrow as well.
Please do. Please
do. So tomorrow, another one of my brilliant colleagues, Cindy Collins Clark. Cindy and I launched Veterans Families United, and she and I created a design for veterans and their family members to recover from post-combat shock. Cindy is a counselor herself, but she's also the mother of Joe Collins, a veteran who he wrote a pamphlet called The Long Journey Home, which is about his recovery from PTSD in the war in Iraq. And he's still on that long journey home, but he's much closer now. He's many years later, really reclaiming his brilliance. And that is due to the impeccable caregiving of his family. So when I met Cindy and Joe, it ignited in me an incredible understanding about my own history. It led ultimately to writing a book. They Were Families, How War Comes Home, which is the understanding of how my father's combat shock reignited his head injury and was responsible for the incredible violence he inflicted on my family, including my brother, my late brother, and me and my mother. I grew up in the wake of combat shock, and meeting Joe Collins and collaborating with Cindy Collins Clark in creating Veterans Families United is the story we want to tell tomorrow about how war trauma comes home and contributes to burnout and is the precursor to what many of you are experiencing when you experience burnout. And that awareness, as V articulated so magnificently at Chartres, I have to say that for me, the rock star at Chartres, in addition to Jim Garrison, was V. And her speaking from the wound and learning through her book, The Apology, that I just finished reading, how we can dive into that wound as a way of recovering from burnout by explicating the origins of it. And that's what I did when I met Cindy Collins Clark, who will be our featured speaker tomorrow. And when I wrote, They Were Families. They were families. They were families, my brother, How War Comes Home. So we'll address that tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. We're all suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome one way or another. And so tomorrow's session will be particularly poignant for all of us, I think. So thank you for that. Nalini, Spring, Stephanie, this has been brilliant once again. So that'll bring us to a close for today, everyone. You're welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link that Stan just put in the chat box. And we'll see you all again tomorrow, same time, same station for Humanity Rising. Bye for now. Thank you all so much.